If you invest $500 a month over a long enough period of time, you can end up in a very different place financially than most people around you. Not because you did anything special, but because you stayed consistent when most people didn't. If you increase that to $1,000 a month, the outcome changes, but more importantly, the experience changes. You don't just end up with more money. You go through life differently while you're building it. Most people focus on the result, but what really matters is what happens in the middle. Let's start with VOO. VOO is the ETF that tracks the S&P 500. You're buying the largest companies in the US. You're not picking winners. You're not timing the market. You're just participating in the system. And that system, over long periods, grows. Not smoothly, not predictably, but consistently enough that if you stay in it, it works. If you invest $500 a month, that's about $6,000 a year. Over decades, that can turn into something around $1 million. If you invest $1,000, it pushes you closer to $2 million. That's the math. But the math is not the hard part. The hard part is staying in long enough for the math to work. Because here's what actually happens. You start investing. Nothing changes. You check your account. Still nothing. A year goes by. It feels slow. 2 years go by. It still feels slow. And at some point, you start thinking, what's the point? And this is where most people quit. Not because they failed, but because they got tired of waiting. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Even if you do everything right, it still feels slow for a long time. There is no early reward. There is no excitement. There is no moment where everything suddenly makes sense. It's just gradual. And that's exactly why it works. Because most people cannot tolerate that feeling. They need feedback. They need progress. They need something happening now. So they switch. They chase. They try something else. And every time they do that, they reset the entire process. That's the real cost. Not losing money, losing time. And time is the one thing compounding needs. Now this is where the difference between 500 and 1,000 starts to matter in a different way. At 500, you're building stability. You feel a bit safer. You worry less. You know something is happening in the background. At 1,000, you start to feel momentum. You feel like you're actually moving forward. And that feeling keeps you in the game, which is everything. Because the strategy only works if you don't leave. That's the real edge. Not intelligence. Not timing, just staying. Now let's go back to VOO. It's simple. It tracks the market. It's low cost. It's diversified. It grows with the economy. There's nothing impressive about it. And that's exactly why it's powerful. Because you don't need to think about it. You don't need to adjust it. You don't need to optimize it every week. You just need to stay in it. And that's what makes it realistic. Because the more complicated something is, the harder it is to maintain. And the harder it is to maintain, the more likely you are to break it. So the goal is not to find the best strategy. It's to find one you won't abandon. And for most people, that means something simple, something boring, something that doesn't require constant decisions. Because decision fatigue is real. And over time, it leads to mistakes. So if you strip everything down, this is what actually works. Pick a broad index like VOO. Invest consistently. Ignore most of the noise. And only adjust when your life changes, not when the market moves. Now, if we go back to the original idea, 500 versus 1,000. The difference is not just the final number, it's the experience. One gives you stability, the other gives you momentum. And both are valid. But they lead to different versions of you over time. And that's the part people don't measure. How you feel, how you think, how you react, because those things compound too, just like money. So in the end, the question is not, is VOO a good investment? The question is, can you stay consistent long enough to let it work? Because if you can, you don't need anything else.